few years back, an internet blogger put together a fun series of photos of college football teams wearing their rivals' colors instead of their true school colors. And to get us started this morning, I want to just take a few moments real quick and show you a couple of the top ones. So Dave will click on that first one. Here is the Oklahoma Sooners wearing that burnt orange of their hated rival, the Texas Longhorns. How about that? Next one, Dave. And we got to reverse the fortunes. Here is Texas wearing that crimson of Oklahoma instead of their normal color. Now that one doesn't actually look too terribly off, does it? That one's not quite as bad. We'll keep working through these. Go ahead, Dave. This is Auburn. If you know anything about college sports, Auburn, they are a nice kind of an orange with a navy blue, and they're wearing the Crimson Tide's crimson, their hated enemy, Alabama. Go ahead to the next one here, Dave. This is the Florida Gators. Okay, they're usually a nice bright royal blue and some orange, and they're wearing the Florida State Seminoles colors. Oh, terrible. Next one here. We'll go back to Alabama now, wearing some Auburn navy blue and orange. Doesn't look right, does it? That's weird. And now, let's really get to it, because we're in Big Ten country. How about that? Isn't that awful? I don't know what's worse. I imagine if we have some Buckeye fans in here, that doesn't sit well, does it? As a Michigan fan, that does not sit well either. Next one here. And there we are, Michigan in some scarlet and gray going on there. That's not a good look. That looks pretty putrid, really. So, and then, because we've got a lot of Spartan fans in the house, how about that? How about your beloved green and white Spartans rocking some maize and blue? Yeah, I saved that one for last, knowing we have many Spartan fans here. So you're welcome for that. But there are some things that you just can't do, right? You can't do this. I mean, there's something in these photos. They do something to us. It's jarring to see a once thought rival now appearing to be one of us, or vice versa. It's unsettling for any of our fans as we think about this, seeing our familiar sports teams and players repping a different team color. Specifically, ones that we have always rooted against, those true rivals of ours. In our passage that we just read out of Mark 2, I think we see a similar uniform swap, and how it was jarring for many people in that town as they now had to see a despised tax collector change teams. Now, this morning's text that we just read comes directly following a familiar passage that we actually dealt with a few weeks back. So I want to just take a quick moment and recap what has taken place here as we get into Mark chapter 2, what has taken place in Jesus' early ministry. See, Jesus had actually come back to Capernaum, that's the setting here, to take a break. And as we talked about before, this is because Capernaum was actually the place that Jesus would call home during his ministry years. And so Jesus is returning for a little bit of a break, but as we found out before and we continue today, there's not much R&R for Jesus here in Capernaum. And so as we talked about back in September about the healing of the paralyzed man, and how in that account Jesus forgives a man's sins because of his friend's faith. And the religious folks of the day, they didn't like that. They said things like, well, he can't do that. Who does he think he is? Only God can forgive sins. Which ultimately led Jesus to eventually heal the paralyzed man, right? And it's this amazing moment. We covered that before. And it sets the stage for Jesus' ministry to the hurting, to the sick, to those that were lost. And that's what brings us right now into our text for today. And what is being demonstrated, I want us to center in on this. What's being demonstrated to us early, 2 chapters into the book of Mark, is that Jesus didn't come and operate as the religious elite, okay, those steeped in the Jewish law and tradition. He didn't operate the way they expected. Rather, as the book of Luke would tell us, Luke 4 would say, Jesus came to share good news with the poor. He came to proclaim freedom for the oppressed. He came to give sight to the blind, and he came to free everyone who suffers. And these religious teachers of the law, they couldn't see the coming of the Messiah differently than they had been taught to. They couldn't see it differently than they wanted to. And once again, Jesus is about to blow their minds, this time by calling a despised tax collector to come join him. Now, a couple of quick details before we do get into the meat of where we're going today. I want to just make sure that you're up to speed with what's going on in Capernaum and why this is a big deal. So Capernaum, this town, was a major travel route on the western, from the eastern to the western coast of the Sea of Galilee. Okay, so it was a perfect place, if you're a tax collector, to set up a tax booth. And here tax collectors could collect on all the imports and the exports happening through the harbors and the roadways. So Levi would have been able to tax on things like the number of wheels on your wagon. Okay? He would have been able to tax on the number of legs on your mules and your donkeys and your ox, which hopefully, if they're worth much, they're before, right? I mean, he's taxing on that. Okay, just making sure you're with me. Everyone, picture that in your head. Okay, that makes sense now? There we go. And he would even charge a pedestrian tax if someone was just simply walking by. One little fun side note, because we know some of the other early disciples of Jesus were fishermen. That's how we do it. I know it was this, actually, with a net. They're fishermen. And Levi would have actually been able to charge taxes on the number of fish that were caught by fishermen. Talk about some awkward moments in the early following of Jesus. And now, here in this account, Jesus is going to call this generally detested and frankly dishonest taxman to be one of his followers. So, this morning, as we dive in fully, let's take a look at how ordinary people allow themselves room to change and then learn to see others with that same ability to change as well. And so, going forward, we will be only talking about this Levi guy as Levi. He does eventually become Matthew, my namesake a little bit here, but we're going to only call him Levi so you don't get confused, okay? But it's the same person, just so you know, if you're like, wait a minute, this is like a weird change here. So here we go. So in verse 13, as we already read, we're told that Jesus went out beside the lake. And see, people are starting to follow Jesus, and the crowds were starting to gather, and they're coming to him. And so Jesus is taking the time to teach them, and he is moving with intention here early in his ministry to proclaim the good news. And now, in the midst of all this, getting things going, all these crowds, Jesus notices a person. Verse 14 said, as he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus. We're told that he saw Levi. Crowds of people are everywhere with Jesus. He's doing his thing, he's teaching, and he locks on to one person. And this man happens to be sitting where? He's sitting at a tax collector's booth. Just to tie this all together, Levi was a tax collector, folks, which was another way of the author letting us know that no one liked him. He was running a taxation business which gave him permission to charge taxes, even as we said, on pedestrians walking by his tax booth. He was required to send in a certain portion of those taxes to Rome, but he could charge additional tax and keep that extra as personal profit. And as a result, tax collectors, much like Zacchaeus, who we talked about months ago, okay, they often became wealthy off the backs of their own community members. Now, I understand, I'm a human myself, okay, up here. I understand that it's common for us that we typically make judgments, snap judgments of people based on things like their appearance and their social standing, okay? But here, in our main text, Jesus gives us a different path for that. I would say Jesus gives us a better path because he saw something more. In Levi's own account of his calling, in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 9, he says it like this. He says, he, meaning Jesus, saw a man. See, Jesus saw in this moment past the scum of the earth moniker that tax collectors had earned by cheating their neighbors. Jesus saw beyond that. Jesus saw a person. Jesus saw Levi's humanity. And I believe that Jesus could see that Levi was unfulfilled. I think Jesus could see that he was searching for something more, something of significance. And we'll come back to that in just a moment, so hang that in your head just for a second. But what I'm getting at here, okay, is that, think about this. It's that when the God who became human looks at people, he sees potential. He sees value. He knows each of our worth. And yes, let's be very real about this. He knows that each of us are a little or a lot of mess. Okay? Sometimes we're a hot mess walking around. That's just the reality. Okay? But he knows that each of us still matters. He can see what no one else can see. And that does mean that he can see all the things that we feel guilty about, things that have caused us shame. He knows our worst moments. And he knows those worst moments are the things that other people try to define us by. So he knows all this, but he sees our ability to participate in a better future. And it's in that kind of true seeing that Jesus summons Levi to come follow him. And what Levi does is startling, I think. I mean, he doesn't make any kind of big public declaration of new allegiance. Instead, he gets up and he follows Jesus. He just immediately jumps in on this offer. And I love that. Maybe you need to just sit with that for a quick second. Because he could have just given mere intellectual consent, right? Like, oh yeah, that sounds like a good plan, Jesus. You'll be around. You're hanging out in Capernaum often. I'll catch up with you at some point. He could have had some intention to follow Jesus. No, Levi, he makes a decision of his choosing, and then he participates. He moves on it. Now, I said we come back to this. And this is the thing. I believe that Levi's quick reaction, okay, to leave everything and to follow Jesus points to a life of searching for a deeper purpose and a deeper meaning, something of significance. And just think about it in your own life. I mean, we rarely will give up something or someone that we benefit from without a struggle. And if you don't believe me, think about how often we all stay in jobs that we don't like because, frankly, it's comfortable. See, I think this part of his wanting something more makes Levi a very ordinary and, thankfully, a very relatable person for us. We too want something real and meaningful, and we desire to be part of a better story that will provide some real and lasting joy and purpose in our lives. I mean, I think we all, and I've had many conversations even of recent that tell me this is true, we all have this very common longing to be truly seen, to be truly known and heard. And we typically pursue this longing. My question is, though, in pursuing that longing to be seen and known and heard, is that in your quest for those things, those affirmations, how are you changing? Are you moving more in step with the call of Jesus to follow him and to participate in his kingdom that is here and now in our time? Because Levi was ready for that kind of change. Are you ready to participate in a new and, yes, continual transformation within yourself, and then how you will see other people because of that? I love how Levi's response is wholehearted. He was moved to go all in with Jesus, and he jumped at the chance to participate in God's kingdom that had entered his space and time. I mean, his full and total commitment, it led to this massive personal transformation for him, which is amazing. But I believe even better, it led to a community transformation as well, because Levi began to correctly see other people. That's our next point here, to correctly see other people. See, if you would have asked Levi at this point in his life and in his journey and in this moment with Jesus, if he thought that this Jesus fellow was going to repurpose his abilities for some unique, I'm going to call them evangelistic opportunities, okay, and some unique work. I'm guessing he would have said, I don't know. Not so sure about that. I'm just going to follow this guy. But along the way, I do imagine that Levi began dreaming a bit. I bet he began asking himself, what do I do well? Maybe that would be a good place to start. And perhaps this idea comes to his mind as you've read the text along with me. He says, I really like to have dinner parties. I really love to host people and bring them over to my place. I'm really good at that, maybe, because it sounds like a crowd was there. He must be pretty good. So Levi sets out to have a dinner party, and he invites the people that would normally come to his get-togethers, which, spoiler alert, we know it's a bunch of his tax collector buddies, and it's other notorious sinners. Oh. Now, Levi wouldn't have been ignorant to the fact that the religious folks didn't really like him and his friends, okay? And he wouldn't have been ignorant to the fact that now he was involved in a bit of a uniform swap situation in response to his call from Jesus. So just think about that. When someone makes a quick change, think about if that felt unsettling at all to look at those goofy pictures. That's the kind of tension here. Like, woo, that's not right. And so knowing that tension, it wouldn't have been shocking, to me at least, if Levi would have bailed out on all his buddies and his colleagues. Because, he had to have the new uniform. He had to put on the new look. But that's not what happens, right? I believe that Levi knew that many of his friends, his colleagues, he knew that they were just as unsatisfied or unfulfilled with their lives as he was. See, through Jesus seeing him, Levi began to correctly see others, and he knew to look for the people that weren't content or happy with the way things were either. It's because, folks, listen to this. This is a truth for all of us. If you or I are looking past anyone, if we're looking beyond anyone, we are most likely missing out on what God has called us to do. Namely, this morning, that is to correctly see people. So what's Levi do? He leverages his home for ministry to the world and to the real people in it. See, no longer did he just see people as a means to his own gain and his own ends. Instead, he actually changed to see people as people. And this is because a real and continual experience with Jesus means that we don't have to be fearful of a world full of people that live a different way than us. I'm going to say that one more time. I didn't put it up there on a slide, and I probably should have, because I want you to hear this. A real and continual experience with Jesus means that we don't have to be afraid of a world full of people that live a different way than us. Said another way for us, in case that one doesn't hit home, we should not brush aside or dismiss people who don't follow our preferred approach to life. Instead, we can actually just participate with Jesus and with these people in all spaces, in all places, with these people that need to be known and they need to be seen just as much as we did need to be seen, and we still need to be seen. Andy Stanley, who's one of my favorite, I guess I'll put him in the Christian author camp. Boy, that's a real pigeonhole, though, isn't it? He's got a lot to say. But Andy Stanley says it like this in his book, Deep and Wide. He says this: if the goal is to make a difference, we're going to pause real quick right there. Think about Levi. He's wanting purpose. He's wanting something that would bring a greater sense of meaning. He's feeling unfulfilled. So if the goal is to make a difference, then relational bridge building is a critical step. We resist being influenced by people we don't know or don't trust. We are open to the influence of those whom we trust or whom we perceive have our best interests at heart. Trust requires common ground. There is a next slide, I think, here. Trust requires empathy. We'll read that last little bit together one more time. Of those whom we trust or whom we perceive have our best interests at heart. Trust requires common ground. Trust requires empathy. So, how do we do this? Basically, what I'm asking is, how can ordinary people like us, doesn't mean I think you're just ordinary and boring. We're regular folk. Yeah, sorry, Joe. How can ordinary people like us allow ourselves room to change from an exclusively do you see me posture to a focus on correctly seeing others? What I would say, going from a do you see me posture to an I see you posture. And I have 3 actionable steps for you this morning, things to consider. First one is we communicate acceptance. Now, saying something like that in the year 2021 in a church, I'm sure everyone reacts a little different to that, but listen. Verse 15 says it like this, right there. Mark 2:15, it says, while Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. They were having dinner together. This is a posture and a demonstration of hospitality, of welcome, of acceptance. It's a snapshot of people that were settling in for a long and a relaxed meal together. Because to share a meal together in a home centered around a table is a meaningful expression of recognition and friendship. Just this week, I saw a bunch of pictures of people out to eat with friends and stuff, and I'm like, look at that. We're all around the table, there's a bunch of smiles, it's fun. It says, I see you. We have friendship. There's recognition. In Levi's culture, when you had a meal with someone, you were saying, I accept you. I identify with you as a human being. That's why throughout the Old Testament and even into the New Testament, they talked about welcoming the stranger so much. You fed them more than they could possibly eat. And it's because this kind of moment is a basis for empathy and understanding. I mean, just think about it. To eat from the same loaf of bread, maybe not so much in the COVID years now, but that was actually to join yourself to the person that you were enjoying the meal with. And I still believe that even in our culture right now, to take time for such an expression is to still say, I accept you. I see you. And here in our main account, I'm also just reminded, real quick side note here, that some of the people who are the most genuinely accepting of others and communicate this kind of acceptance are often new followers of Jesus. They're new believers. And I think it's because they just naturally want to extend to others what has been extended to them. And namely, folks, that is grace. But I get it. Because as I look around this room, we got a lot of seasoned veterans of the faith. That's a good thing. Not to squash anybody who's doing that. Over time, though, it's just a reality. Some of our enthusiasm can fade. And so many of our connections with what we might call non-Christians, I don't want to label people, but outside of the church, okay? So many of those connections are replaced with other friendships and relationships within the church family. And in one sense, I'm not diminishing that, that's actually really good. Because there are many of us that we have to step away and dissolve and break away from unhealthy relationships, don't we? Okay? That is an accurate, good thing. But we must hold in tension, as if there's not enough tension in the world right now. We must hold in tension that we wouldn't shield ourselves from the very people that Jesus loves and cares for too, that just aren't here in our little comfy group right here. And that's why we talk so much. I bring up words like participation, and certainly participation in community, in this family, but even in the greater family of God that's out here around us, the kingdom of God here and now. We talk about things like being a good neighbor, and we do that because God wants us to engage where we live on purpose for the sake of his love. So we have to communicate acceptance. The second one that goes along with this, how we can move more from a do you see me to an I see you, is that we accept opposition. Now here's the reality, okay? If you're going to go out and you're going to live on purpose, attempting to correctly see people in the community, it's almost certain that you will be critiqued. Okay? It's almost a guarantee. And guess what? You're going to be frequently critiqued by the people who are the most self-righteous. Verse 16 in our main text says this: when the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, excuse me, saw him, that's Jesus, eating with the sinners and tax collectors, they asked his disciples, why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? In this text, this is the first time in our account that Mark mentions the Pharisees by name. And I believe he's making a point for us here, because the Pharisees were known specifically as separatists, or literally the detached ones. In their minds, Pharisees had reached the place where they were better than others. So you can see how this particular religious establishment was going to have some issues with the promised Messiah, who likes to focus on and hang out with sinners. Now, it's good for us to give a quick little caveat and acknowledge that, at least on the front end somewhere in there, the Pharisees were just trying to obey God's laws. Okay, so somewhere it started from a good place. But the problem was they began to add a bunch of other laws to the list. And one of the top added rules that they had was to stay away from all sinners, to stay away from the ungodly, and to stay away from the unclean. I mean, it really bothered the Pharisees that Jesus spent time with all these corrupt and sinful people. That he would spend time focusing on these lesser deserving humans. And we have to be careful, because the reality is, folks, this still happens today with many religious folks. As followers of Christ, we should accept that opposition will come as we build bridges, as we communicate acceptance, and we seek to engage in the communities around us. But there is good news here, okay? As we do this work, as we turn the focus to seeing others correctly, the good news is the opposition that we might be hearing in the wings, it won't jump out to us as much, because guess what? We'll no longer only have eyes for ourselves. We'll be too busy trying to correctly see others. We'll be a little less, which is hard to do, let's be real, we'll be a little less self-absorbed. And then our last actionable step here for today of how we do this is we imitate Jesus. Okay, hang in there, we're almost done here. But I love how Jesus continually reframes our understanding. I love how he's subtly clarifying his aim and his mission in all of these opportunities throughout the gospel accounts. Because his entire purpose was to spend time with people in order to share a real love with them, hopefully moving them towards salvation. And he was here to demonstrate a better way to operate, a better way to live in our world. And we see this here in verse 17 as Jesus encounters opposition for his accepting of the unsavory folks. It says this: it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Now imagine with me, just for a little bit of fun here real quick, a hospital that has a mission statement something like this: we are here to protect the healthy. True, but if you are sick, stay away, because we can't help you. We wouldn't call that a hospital, would we? I mean, that's pretty absurd, and it doesn't really make sense. And just like that, let's consider the fact that churches for flawless people don't make any sense either. We're not a country club of all the good people. Let's be clear, and I know this is the heartbeat of this place. It's why, I made a reference to 11 and a half years. I want another 11 and a half. Because, folks, we get it, right? This faith community of ours exists to help the hurting, to minister to the broken, to serve the ones that may be wrapped up or tangled up in sin. And you know it. This is a place where we love the obnoxious and unlikable people. Yeah, sorry, Al. No, Al owned that. No. But we do that, right? We do that in this space because we do it so all of us, can experience the love, which when I talk about the love, I mean Jesus, love personified. We want to experience that because Jesus has seen us and he's called our name. And they should have the opportunity for that as well. You see, in this one statement from Jesus about doctors and sick people, Jesus moves from an analogy to a declaration of his mission. And he says, I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. See, Jesus came to us. He came to humanity, and he took on flesh in order to bear our burdens and demonstrate a better way to live. And by living among us, he revealed how the true path of love, it moves us, folks, to lay down our life for the sake of others. There's no way getting around that. If you are a follower of Christ, folks, that is the call that he has placed on your life, to follow him. As uncomfortable as that may be, and yes, it is uncomfortable. He has called us to be an imitator of the one who is God in human form. It's a call on our lives to be fully seen and known, and then to return that, to then see others, to do the work of completely seeing them. See, Levi was an ordinary person that because of his willingness to be seen and then to see others fully, and he got to witness firsthand some extraordinary moments. It's my prayer for us this morning that we would respond and experience the same thing.